My name is Eli Howes. Can you please tell me your full name?
Good morning, sir. My name is Fu Zhiyong, but you can just call me Zhang.
Zane, in this first part, I'd like to ask you some questions about yourself. Let's talk about where you live. Do you live in a small town or a big city?
Right now, I'm actually living in this big city, which is right next to the mega city, Shanghai, where it only takes around like half an hour's train ride to get there. Yeah, it's called Suzhou.
What do you like most about living there?
I like I like the facilities it offers. The malls. Sometimes when we get bored, you can just wandering around and doing some window shopping, and also the parks. Everything. I love the here.
Do you think you would like to stay in this place for a long time?
Yes. I'll probably stay here for 1 or 2 more years. Just try to save up some money, and then I'll eventually thinking about doing my PhD. Yeah, that's something on my list.
Let's move on. Let's talk about borrowing and lending. Have you ever borrowed books from other people?
Yes, I have. But many just it was in the past. When I was like a primary school student, we would go to the library, the school libraries, to borrow some books from the librarians in the school, and we would read those translated version of those great literatures. I remember we got some books from the Russian literatures, and also English ones. Yeah, but they were all in Chinese.
And has anyone ever borrowed money from you?
Yes, it doesn't really happen that often, but I did actually borrow some money back when I think when we were like in college, where we're kind of like broke. And sometimes, a friend of mine would borrow some money to buy something, and I would just, lend them some.
Do you like to lend things to other people?
Well, it really depends on what kind of thing we're talking about here. If it's something that is too personal, for example, a phone, I wouldn't necessarily want to do that. But if it's something that is not that personal, why not? Yeah, I like to help people.
And how do you feel when people don't return things that they've borrowed from you?
Well, definitely, I would feel annoyed. I think it's not nice.
Mhm.
And then I don't like confrontation, so I would just subtly kind of like hinting them that they need to return something they borrowed from me. Um, yeah, I wouldn't like say it like directly, like, hey, you need to return something or no. I wouldn't do that.
Let's move on. Let's talk about stories. Did you like listening to stories when you were a child?
Yes, I did. Back when I was a little kid, my parents were pretty busy, but I had an older sister who would, read some bedtime stories to me. Those Chinese folk stories that she would read to me, and yeah, I love it.
And nowadays, do you prefer listening to stories or reading them?
Good question. I love listening to audiobooks. I feel like I don't know. I feel like it requires a lot if you have to sit down and read a book yourself. But while you're listening to audiobooks, you get to do some other things. You can multitask, like cleaning your room and stuff. I just feel like I can't really sit down for a while and just read. It would be a little bit boring for me.
Would you ever consider writing a book?
Wow. No, I would never really consider that. I think being a writer, you sort of have to be very observant, and you have to sort of like sensitive to the environment, and also you have to be critical. Those are things that I think I would need to work on. I'm a very, very gullible person. I easily get influenced by people.
We're going to move on to part two, and in this part, I'm going to give you a topic, and I'd like you to talk about it for 1 to 2 minutes. All right, remember you have 1 to 2 minutes for this, so don't worry if I stop you. I'll tell you when the time is up. Can you start speaking now, please?
Sure. So the country I would like to visit in the future would definitely be Spain. The reason why I chose Spain is because I've heard great things about that country. I have some friends traveled there, and they said the people are really nice there. They would go out of their way to help you. And also the food. They talk about the ham and how healthy they are. compared with the food that we have here, in most cities in China. I would consider it's very greasy. But yeah, and also the buildings there, the architectures there. One of my friends actually went there and she talked about how beautiful, the Gothic area in Spain. I think it's in Barcelona. I'm not sure. But yeah, the food, the people, the weather. I've heard that it's a great destination for not just European people, but also people around the world. Although I've heard that now they have like a protest against the tourist, but I'm actually not against that because whenever I go traveling, I try to avoid going to those tourist traps or like tourist destination. I would go those off beaten path area where I could actually talk to local people, and I believe that by talking to local people and contributing to the local community by choosing stay maybe in a lovely homestay instead of like a big chain hotel, in that way, I think we can contribute to the local economy. So eventually, it's a win-win idea because on one hand, I can learn something, and also local people could actually benefit from the tourism. That's what I kind of like wanted to go. And also,
Oh,
I also want to
okay,
learn about, okay.
thank you. And do you think you will go to Spain in the future?
Yes, I'm actually considering doing a CELTA certificate there. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
Okay, so we've been talking about a foreign country that you would like to visit, and I'd like to discuss with you one or two more general questions related to this. Let's consider, first of all, traveling. Some people say that old people are kind of boring because they always go to the same areas, places they've already been to, that they feel familiar with. What do you think about that?
I think it's certainly true. There are quite a lot of old senior citizens would prefer to travel to an area where they feel familiar with. I think on one hand, it's sort of like give them a feeling of being nostalgic. I think it's a feeling that everybody sort of wanted to experience from time to time. So I wouldn't think that it's just old people's thing. I think everybody wants to go somewhere that they feel most familiar with. But I do think that there are some other older people like to try new things. You've heard people maybe travel to a new country without really knowing about the language. That's not just young people's privilege. I think nowadays older people are still kind of like trying to think outside the box and trying to do something new. Yeah.
You know, one thing I see regularly, for example, part of the year I spend time in Barcelona and I see large tour buses full of lots and lots of old people traveling together. What do you think are the pros and cons of traveling in a large group?
Okay, the pros are, I hate using the word, but it's sort of like efficient. If you want to say being traveling, if you want to, experience all of those tourist destinations in one day or in a very tight schedule, that would definitely help you to fulfill that goals that you have. I have nothing against that, but for me or for some people like me or a lot of people, I think they would prefer something that is more individual. They wouldn't want to call them a tourist. They want to call them a traveler. So by doing that, they sort of cut themselves off, with the chance of talking to local people
Mm.
or going to those hidden gems or like off beaten path, like I mentioned, and they will lose a lot, tremendously a lot. I mean, if they just hop on a tourist bus and go into those tourist destinations, it's a shame. Yeah.
How do you think tourism, traveling will change in the future?
I think it will probably become more and more personal tailored,
Mm.
where people might hire a personal guide. Now it's kind of like picking it up, but I think it will become a new norm where people would hire a personal guide who live in the local and actually showing them around, the restaurant that local people go, or even have the so-called eco tourism or nowadays they even invite them to local community to contribute. Thinking about a person who is from China going to Spain and stay in the local community, maybe have like a Chinese or language exchange meetup and things like that. That would be cool. I think it's still picking up. I think in the future it will become a new norm, especially for Chinese people. I think a lot of Chinese people are still trying to, when they go traveling, they still sort of like going to those tourist destinations. But I think I've seen people are doing a little bit of change of that, and having an individual trip, or even just like I said, traveling abroad and experience a different culture and stuff.
Mm. Let's move on. Let's talk about hosting large international events. One large international sporting event is the World Cup. What do you think are the advantages for a country of hosting such a large sporting event?
The advantages is definitely by hosting those events, you get to show people how it's a way of showing your strength as a nation, and then show people, the great infrastructure that you have, or how united a country is, towards a certain goal, and then in a way solidified a country's ambition. But I would argue that it if we always using this kind of way to sort of show off, there's a fine line. I mean, on one hand, the great infrastructure that you have can definitely show the strength, the economic growth that you have. But on the other hand, we should also consider about the environmental issue, and also a lot of whole slew of issues that related to that. It's just one part of showing that how great the country is.
Okay, thank you very much. That is the end of the speaking test.
Thank you.
Zane, wonderful speaking test. How are you feeling now?
Thank
You
you.
mentioned you were nervous
I'm feeling
before.
nervous.
You
I
still
was
feel nervous?
nervous as hell. Sorry.
Really? That's so
Mm,
funny. I didn't pick up
mm.
on you feeling nervous. I thought you were totally relaxed, just
No, I was nervous. Now
well,
I feel a little bit more relaxed.
wait, well, you're good at hiding those nerves. I had no idea. I thought you were just kind of in your flow state, considering the questions,
No.
answering them.
I, I was thinking about which big word I should use. I was thinking about maybe I should throw some English idioms, but it's hard. You have to think on your feet. You have to think about this and that, and it's just like so hard.
Sure, but you used plenty of idioms. You just used an idiom right there. You have to think on your
Mm.
feet. That's an idiom.
Yeah, yeah. Mm. Yeah.
You're definitely someone that doesn't need to try and insert more large vocabulary into your speech. You're naturally using so much
Mm,
brilliant vocabulary when you're
mm.
genuinely communicating these complex
Okay.
ideas. And by the way, you are the master at part three. You were really good
Yeah.
at just
Mm,
signposting your way through lots of logical arguments and explaining your ideas really well.
mm. Thank you.
So
Thank you.
some people watching this might be thinking, how has Zane reached such a high level of English? Because you've got 8.5 in speaking. How have you reached such a high level of English?
For me, because a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on, speaking. They would pay a lot of money practicing their speaking with a native speaker. It's not it's I don't against I'm not against that, but for me, I think you should listen a lot. For me, because I listen a lot, I listen to a lot of podcasts, I listen to a lot of like audiobooks, and it really helps me because if you have that sort of like confidence when you speak, the fluency, the grammar, it just comes naturally. So I think I would, for anyone who want to improve their English, I would say input, listening is really important. Yeah, so listen and listen to a wide range of accents, which would really help you because when you go out and traveling, you will find out that not everyone speak the very standard received pronunciation or American English. There are like a wide range of accents that you will be exposed to.
But the thing is, I can imagine with your level of English, you could listen to any podcast on any topic. You could watch any film, probably on double speed and get every single word.
Mm.
If somebody who's watching this is sitting at band five, they don't have that same level of content that they can engage with. So what about these people?
We all need to start from somewhere. You know, when I first started, when I was in high school, I grew up in a rural area in China. I wasn't exposed to, you know, the authentic English materials. But then I started to watch those TV shows like the classic sitcom like Friends, so I would suggest people who really want to who have a lower level of English proficiency, they can start watch something that is maybe easier to understand, cartoons, animations. It's always a good start. I'm a big fan of Pixar. I think they can always find the English materials that is suit their level. So it shouldn't be too difficult and it shouldn't be too easy. So they can just adjust what they like to listen to or watch. I would suggest animations. Stay away from the Big Bang Theory, no matter what people say, because those are really difficult. And also the two girls, and they keep saying like, oh, that's the greatest thing. But for me, I think it is a good TV show, the shows I just list, but it might not be really good for you. You should watch something that is more um, regarding daily lives. I mean, there's a one show called Brothers and Sisters. I really love that show. It's really good. Yeah. You can start watching those, like I said, more life related kind of TV series instead of those hot TV shows might not really suit you. Yeah.
So,
Mm,
one question that I get is
mm,
from a lot of students is like, there's no native speakers around. There's no one for
mm,
me to practice with who's
mm,
a native speaker. And so your
mm.
advice is, well, actually, you don't need a native speaker. There's a whole world of content at your fingertips. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I even talk to myself. I have this habit of like, if I watch something that is really fun, or if I listen to a really good podcast, I would record myself. I would record like a audio. I would be like, hey, I just heard this amazing story from this, podcast where it talks about how we should deal with a confrontation, or how should we be confident, or things like that. And it really helps. And then also, travel, go traveling and talk to people. And even when you go traveling, for me, the ironic thing is that I met a lot of people who are not actually from the English speaking country. I met a lot of people who are from, Germany. They speak with a very heavy accent, but we can communicate with each other perfectly. Yeah, and Belgium and Netherlands, a lot of people. I actually I have little interaction or like encounter with a British person or like American person. Yeah,
Right, okay. Yes.
yeah.
And so what about, for example, taking these skills about getting better in general English and then applying them to the IELTS exam?
Mm.
What advice would you or what advice would you have for people who are improving their English and now they're getting ready for their IELTS exam and that's their focus?
I think for anyone who wish to get a higher score in IELTS speaking test, this might be as cliche as it sound. I hate memorizing and giving a so-called quote unquote standard answer. I think you should really be able to express yourself. And then sometimes when I tell my students, I'll be like, in part one, you just need to tell the examiner how you feel, or whether you do the things or not. Because a lot of times students will be like, they will say, oh, I need a standard answer. But there's no standard answer. Just answer the question using 2 or 3 sentences and express yourself, and that's fine. And then for part three, I strongly suggest them to be critical. I'll be like, for each question, you have to think about the pros and cons. Even though it sounds perfect, but you have to talk about reservations or the caution, or things that you need to be careful about. So in that way, it can make your idea more convincing. The examiner doesn't necessarily need to agree with you, but once they see the logic in your answer and you're very convinced and you'll be able to expand your ideas, chances are you're going to get a higher score. Yeah.
And you did that so well. Like I said after the
Mm,
test, you're the master of part three,
mm,
really.
mm. Thank you.
So thank you very much for coming on and doing this
Mm,
speaking test with me.
mm. Thank you.